I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. The man my parents want me to marry, I will not marry him.
They had already chosen her husband. The invitations were being prepared. The engagement was days away, and Isabella Hartley was expected to smile and obey. But what no one knew was that Isabella was already in love with another man. The decision had been made quietly, over polished dining tables and whispered conversations behind closed doors. No vote, no discussion, no room for refusal. Isabella Hartley's life had been decided long before she ever understood what love truly was. On the outskirts of London stood the Hartley estate, an imposing mansion wrapped in manicured gardens and iron gates that gleamed beneath the afternoon sun. From the outside, it was the picture of prestige and permanence. Inside, it was a beautiful prison. Isabella stood by the tall window of her bedroom, fingers resting lightly against the glass as she watched gardeners trim hedges into perfect symmetry. Every inch of the property reflected control, precision, expectation. At 23, she had everything society claimed a woman should want, and none of what her heart needed. Her parents had raised her with elegance and discipline. Victoria Hartley, sharp-eyed, impeccably dressed, and utterly unyielding, believed emotions were luxuries, not guides. Charles Hartley, calm and commanding, believed order was the foundation of power. Together they had taught Isabella one immutable truth: love was optional, duty was not. Ever since she was a child, they spoke of marriage not as a bond, but as a transaction. Alliances, influence, preservation of the Hartley name. So when they finally announced her engagement, they spoke as if they were informing her of the weather. Edward Langston, tall, wealthy, connected, a man whose family moved quietly behind the scenes of finance, politics, and social power. A man other families envied, a man Isabella barely knew, and a man she did not love. Because her heart had already been claimed, 3 years earlier, by a man her parents would never accept. His name was Marcus Donovan. Marcus was not born into power. He had no family estate, no lineage worth mentioning in elite circles. What he had instead was something rare. He saw people. They met at a charity art exhibition Isabella had attended out of obligation, drifting from conversation to conversation with practiced smiles she had perfected over the years. She was already bored when she wandered into a quiet corner of the gallery and stopped. A stormy seascape hung on the wall, raw, untamed, alive. Beside it stood Marcus, sketchbook in hand, completely unaware of the room around him. He was capturing the movement of the clouds with intense concentration, as if the world beyond his pencil didn't exist. When their eyes met, there was no spark. There was recognition, the kind that settles deep in the chest, the kind that feels dangerous precisely because it feels right. From that moment, everything changed. Their love did not explode, it grew, quietly. In stolen afternoons and whispered conversations, in cafes tucked away from society's gaze, in museums where they pretended to study paintings while memorizing each other's presence. Marcus listened when Isabella spoke. He challenged her thoughts. He noticed the way her voice changed when she talked about freedom. With him, she wasn't a Hartley. She was simply Isabella. But secrecy has a cost. And as the date of her engagement approached, the walls around her began to tighten. 2 months. That was all the time she had left before her life became irreversible. The evening her mother entered the room, Isabella sensed the shift immediately. Victoria Hartley did not raise her voice. She never needed to. "Your father and I have spoken to the Langstons," she said calmly. The engagement will be formalized next week. Preparations must begin. Isabella's breath caught. Mother, I can't. Victoria turned slowly. You will. My heart belongs to someone else. Victoria's eyes hardened, not with anger, but disappointment. This is not about your heart, she replied. It is about responsibility. Edward is a perfect match. You will obey. The word echoed through Isabella's mind. Obey. That night, Isabella made her choice. She slipped from her room under cover of darkness and crossed the sleeping streets of London, mist curling along the cobblestones, like secrets that refused to stay buried. The art studio door creaked softly as she entered. Marcus looked up, and in that moment everything fragile became urgent. They're arranging my marriage, she whispered. I can't escape it anymore. Marcus took her hands, steady and warm. Then we don't accept it. They'll destroy you, she said. My parents don't lose. Marcus's jaw tightened. Then we fight. When he pulled her into his arms, Isabella understood the truth she had been avoiding. Love was no longer enough. They were going to have to risk everything. And the storm that would follow would change all of their lives forever. Isabella did not return home that night unchanged. She moved through the halls of the Hartley estate the following morning with the same posture, the same composed expression, but something inside her had shifted. A quiet awareness, a sense that every step she took was being measured. The house felt different, too quiet, too orderly. As she descended the grand staircase, she noticed one of the household staff lingering near the doorway longer than necessary. His eyes flicked toward her, then away. When she passed, she caught the faintest pause in his movement, as if he were memorizing her routine. She told herself she was imagining things, but imagination did not explain the way her mother's questions had suddenly become sharper. Where were you yesterday evening? Victoria asked casually over breakfast, folding her napkin with precision. Isabella kept her voice steady. At the library. I needed some air. Victoria nodded slowly, as though filing the answer away rather than accepting it. Edward Langston arrived that afternoon. His visits had become more frequent since the engagement announcement, each one carefully timed, each one wrapped in polite charm. He carried himself like a man who already owned the space he entered. Isabella, he said warmly, bowing his head slightly as he kissed her hand. You look distracted. Do I? She replied. Edward smiled, but his eyes lingered, studying, calculating. He spoke pleasantly about future plans, dinners, travels, introductions to influential friends. He never once asked what she wanted, and when he left, Isabella noticed something that made her stomach tighten. A black car parked across the street. The driver never looked at her, but the engine was running. Marcus felt it too. He noticed it first when a letter he had written to Isabella never arrived. Then another. Then a third returned days later, edges damp, seal disturbed. One evening, as he closed his studio, he spotted a man standing across the street, pretending to examine a shop window that had been closed for years. When Marcus met his gaze, the man turned away too quickly. The city had begun to watch them. They met in a cafe tucked between narrow buildings, the kind of place no one visited by accident. Isabella arrived late, breathless, her scarf pulled low. Someone's following me, she whispered as she sat down. Marcus didn't hesitate. I know. Their eyes met across the table. Fear finally acknowledged aloud. We need to slow down, he said quietly. Change routines. Stop writing. Fewer meetings. Isabella swallowed. Edward suspects. Marcus leaned in. Edward doesn't just suspect. He's observing. Outside, The rain began to fall soft at first, then heavier, blurring the windows and turning the street into shifting reflections. Neither of them noticed the figure seated 2 tables away, listening. Inside the Hartley estate, another pair of eyes watched Isabella closely. Lydia Hartley, her cousin, her confidant, the girl who had shared secrets with her since childhood. Lydia noticed the changes, the tension in Isabella's shoulders, the way she locked her door at night, the way she flinched when servants passed too close. One evening, Lydia followed her, just once. She told herself she was worried, that she was protecting her cousin. She followed Isabella at a distance through the city streets, heart pounding, until she saw her slip into the art studio. And then she saw Marcus, the way he took Isabella's hands, the way Isabella smiled. Lydia felt something sharp twist inside her chest, fear, jealousy, and something darker. Edward Langston did not rush. He never rushed. Instead, he gathered information quietly, methodically, as one does when dismantling an opponent piece by piece. He learned Marcus's name, his income, his associates, his weaknesses. He learned where Isabella went when she thought she was invisible. And he learned something else, something far more useful. Isabella trusted someone inside the house. Edward smiled when he heard that. The first warning came as a phone call. No voice, just breathing. Then a soft click. The second warning came as a note slipped into Isabella's coat pocket during a crowded luncheon. End this before it ends you. She read it 3 times before her hands began to shake. That night, she confronted Lydia. "Have you noticed anything strange lately?" Isabella asked carefully. Lydia hesitated for half a second too long. Strange how? Isabella watched her cousin closely, and for the first time in her life, she wondered who else was listening. Marcus urged her to leave. "Not forever," he said. "Just until we know how deep this goes." Isabella looked around her childhood bedroom, the carved furniture, the portraits of ancestors who had never known what it meant to choose. "I won't run yet," she said quietly. "If I do, they win." Marcus exhaled slowly. "Then we prepare. But preparation requires time." And time was the one thing they no longer had, because Edward Langston had already decided. The engagement would not simply happen, it would be enforced. And Isabella Hartley, whether she realized it or not, had just stepped onto a board where every move was being watched, and every mistake would be punished. The first thing Isabella lost was her sense of safety. It didn't vanish all at once. It eroded slowly, quietly, until even the familiar walls of the Hartley estate felt hostile. Every footstep echoed too loudly. Every closed door felt deliberate. She began to notice patterns. Servants appeared at the wrong times. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Letters she placed carefully on her desk would be subtly moved, as though someone had touched them, then put them back just enough to make her doubt herself. And Lydia was always nearby, too nearby. "You've been quiet lately," Lydia said one evening, sitting on the edge of Isabella's bed, as if she still belonged there. "You look tired." Isabella forced a smile. "Just overwhelmed." Lydia studied her for a moment longer than necessary. Marriage does that to people. The words lingered. Marriage. That night, Isabella dreamed she was running through the Hartley gardens, barefoot and breathless, chased by voices she couldn't recognize. When she woke, her sheets were twisted around her legs, her heart pounding. By morning, the first blow landed. Edward Langston arrived unannounced. Not in the afternoon, not politely scheduled. He came early before breakfast when Isabella was least prepared. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said smoothly as he stepped into the drawing room. But I thought we should speak privately. Victoria Hartley's approval was immediate. Of course, she said. That would be appropriate. Isabella felt the trap closing. Edward waited until they were alone. You've been restless, he said calmly. Distracted. Isabella met his gaze. I'm adjusting. Edward smiled faintly. You're being watched, Isabella. Her breath caught, but she did not let it show. By whom? She asked. Edward tilted his head slightly. By people who care about you, who want to protect you from making regrettable choices. The implication was clear. I won't be threatened, Isabella said quietly. Edward stepped closer. Then don't give anyone reason. He left moments later, polite as ever. But the damage was done. Marcus felt the shift the same day. A gallery that had promised him an exhibition withdrew without explanation. A client stopped responding to messages. A friend who had always been warm suddenly became distant. Pressure, subtle, calculated. That evening, Isabella met Marcus in a museum wing closed for renovation. Dust hung in the air. Their voices echoed softly. They know, she whispered. Marcus nodded. They're isolating us. Isabella's voice trembled. Edward warned me. Marcus clenched his jaw. Then he's moving faster than I expected. Neither of them noticed Lydia watching from the far end of the corridor, her reflection barely visible in the glass. The betrayal did not come loudly. It came dressed as concern. One afternoon, Lydia intercepted Isabella on the staircase. We need to talk, she said softly. Isabella stopped. About what? About Marcus. The name felt like a knife. I overheard something, Lydia continued. He was speaking to someone, planning something dangerous. Isabella stared at her. You're lying. Lydia's eyes shimmered. I'm trying to save you. You've been watching me, Isabella said suddenly. Lydia flinched. Who told you to follow me? Isabella demanded. Silence, and in that silence, Isabella understood. You told them, she whispered. Didn't you? Lydia's voice broke. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Edward said he only wanted to protect the family. He said Marcus would disappear from your life eventually anyway. Isabella stepped back as if struck. You betrayed me. Lydia's tears fell freely now. I was afraid, and he promised me things. That night, Isabella did not sleep. She stared at the ceiling. Listening to the faint sounds of the house breathing around her, she understood now. This was no longer about marriage. It was about control. The next morning, Edward made his second move. A sealed envelope arrived at Marcus's studio. Inside was a single document, a financial notice, a warning. If Marcus continued his involvement with Isabella Hartley, his income sources would be investigated, his contacts scrutinized, his work quietly erased from opportunity. Marcus crushed the paper in his hand. They're trying to ruin me, he said when Isabella arrived, breathless and shaken. They're trying to scare you away, she replied. Marcus took her face in his hands. Listen to me. Whatever happens next, none of this is your fault. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. I brought this into your life. You brought love into my life, he said. And they hate that, because they can't control it. They held each other tightly, knowing something terrible was approaching. That evening, Victoria Hartley summoned Isabella. Her mother's voice was calm but cold. You will end this, Victoria said simply. No, Isabella replied. Victoria nodded once. Then you will learn what defiance costs. As Isabella left the room, Edward watched from the hallway and smiled. By the end of that week, Isabella no longer doubted she was being watched. She felt it in the pauses that followed her movements. in the way conversations shifted when she entered a room. In the sudden interest, strangers took in places she frequented. The Hartley estate had become a stage, and she was the performance. Her mother's control tightened subtly at first. Invitations were screened. Outings required approval. The household schedule, once flexible, became rigid. "You've been tired lately," Victoria remarked one afternoon. "Perhaps it would be best if you stayed home more." Isabella understood the message. Stay visible. Stay contained. Edward, meanwhile, became impossible to avoid. He appeared everywhere at charity functions, gallery openings, even a luncheon Isabella had not known he would attend. Each time, his smile was polite, his words measured, but his eyes never softened. "You seem quieter," he observed once as they stood beside a marble balustrade overlooking a crowded ballroom. "Is something troubling you?" Isabella met his gaze evenly. "I'm thinking." Edward smiled. "I prefer action." Marcus felt the noose tightening faster. Another gallery canceled, another message ignored, another door quietly closed. Even his landlord hinted that continuing his lease might become complicated. The pressure was designed to exhaust him. One evening, Marcus returned to his studio to find the door slightly ajar. Nothing was missing. Nothing was broken. But his sketchbooks had been moved. That was the message. "We can reach you." He didn't tell Isabella immediately. He didn't want to frighten her further. But fear was already taking root in her life. The next warning came disguised as kindness. Lydia appeared at Isabella's door with tea and a carefully rehearsed concern. "You look pale," Lydia said. "You should be careful. Stress does terrible things to people." Isabella watched her cousin closely. "What do you want?" she asked. Lydia hesitated. "Edward thinks you're being influenced." "By Marcus," Isabella said flatly. Lydia nodded. "He believes Marcus is manipulating you, using your emotions." Isabella laughed bitterly. "And you believe him?" "I don't know what to believe anymore," Lydia replied. "But Edward says he's willing to forgive if you do the right thing." The right thing. The phrase echoed like a sentence. That night, Isabella made her first strategic decision. She would stop reacting and start planning. She began by observing quietly Edward's routines, her parents' conversations, the flow of information inside the house. She noticed how Lydia always seemed to know things she hadn't been told, how servants reported back to Victoria, how Edward's visits coincided with moments of pressure on Marcus. It wasn't chaos, it was coordination, and coordination could be exposed. The Hartleys announced a grand garden party. Officially, it was to celebrate Edward's recent business success. Unofficially, it was a display of unity, a public confirmation that the engagement was unshaken. Isabella understood immediately. This was Edward's stage, and he expected her to perform. She told Marcus about the event in a whispered conversation beneath a railway arch, the sound of passing trains swallowing their words. "They want to parade me," she said, "to make it clear I belong to him." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Then we don't give them the performance they expect." That was when Isabella realized something important. Edward had underestimated her. He believed fear would make her obedient. He did not realize fear had made her focused. Over the next few days, Isabella and Marcus gathered everything they could. Letters Edward had sent under the guise of concern, financial warnings disguised as advice, witness accounts from gallery owners pressured into withdrawing support. Marcus reached out to an old friend, Julian, who worked quietly in financial consulting. Someone discreet. Someone who understood leverage. Julian didn't hesitate. If Edward thinks he's invisible, he said, then he's already made his first mistake. Edward made his second. He confronted Isabella privately 2 days before the party. "You're running out of time," he said calmly. "Your parents are losing patience." Isabella folded her hands. "So are you." Edward's eyes narrowed slightly. "Careful." She leaned forward just enough to let him see her resolve. "You don't own me." For the first time, his composure cracked. "Everyone belongs to someone," he said quietly. "The difference is whether you accept it gracefully." Isabella stood. "Then this conversation is over?" Edward watched her leave, and for the first time, he wondered if he had pushed too hard. The night before the garden party, Isabella slept peacefully, not because she was safe, but because she was ready. She knew what would happen next. Edward would expect silence, obedience, a bowed head. What he would not expect was resistance in daylight. And when the morning sun rose over the Hartley estate, casting golden light across trimmed hedges and polished stone, Isabella Hartley prepared to turn the gaze of the world back onto the man who believed himself untouchable. The Hartley garden had never looked more beautiful. Lanterns were strung between ancient trees, their warm light casting a golden glow over manicured hedges and marble pathways. A string quartet played softly near the fountain, the music drifting through the air like a practiced promise of harmony. Every detail had been arranged to project perfection. Every smile was rehearsed. Every guest arrived dressed in elegance, exchanging polite laughter and shallow compliments, unaware that beneath the surface of the celebration, something volatile was building. Isabella descended the stone steps precisely at dusk. She wore a gown of deep emerald green, its fabric catching the light with every movement. Her hair was styled simply, deliberately, no excess, no ornamentation. Control. As she entered the garden, conversations paused for the briefest moment. Edward noticed immediately. He turned from a group of financiers, his expression shifting into something warm and proprietary. He crossed the lawn toward her with measured confidence, placing a hand lightly at the small of her back. "You look exquisite," he said softly. "Exactly as you should." Isabella smiled for the onlookers. Inside, her pulse remained steady. Victoria and Charles Hartley stood near the terrace, surveying the crowd like generals inspecting a battlefield. To them, this evening was proof that order had been restored. Isabella was still theirs. Edward was still in control. Or, so they believed. Marcus arrived quietly. Dressed simply, blending into the periphery, he positioned himself near the far end of the garden, close to the hedges where shadows softened outlines. To the guests, he was merely another acquaintance, unremarkable. To Isabella, he was gravity. Their eyes met only once. That was enough. Edward guided Isabella through introductions, each one reinforcing the image he wanted the world to see. "She'll be joining me in Paris later this year. We're discussing philanthropic initiatives together. She's adjusting beautifully." Each statement landed like a claim. Isabella responded with measured politeness, never contradicting him, never confirming him either. Edward mistook her calm for surrender. Lydia watched from the terrace, her hands clasped tightly together. She had warned Edward that Isabella might do something unexpected. He had dismissed it. "She doesn't have the nerve," he had said. Lydia was no longer certain. As twilight deepened, the guests gathered near the fountain for Edward's address. He stepped forward with practiced ease, raising his glass. "Friends," he began, voice smooth and confident. "Thank you for joining us tonight. This gathering celebrates not just professional success, but the strength of family, unity, and shared values." Polite applause followed. Edward's gaze swept over the crowd before settling on Isabella. "And of course," he continued, "it marks a joyful step forward for Isabella and me as we prepare to begin our life together." The applause grew louder. Edward smiled. That was when Isabella stepped forward. "May I say something?" Her voice cut cleanly through the murmurs. Edward froze only for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. The crowd stilled. Victoria's smile faltered. Charles stiffened. Edward turned toward Isabella, his expression carefully neutral. "Of course," he said, though his eyes warned her otherwise. Isabella faced the guests. She did not rush. She did not tremble. "I want to thank everyone for coming," she said calmly. "Your presence means more than you know." She paused, letting silence stretch. "This evening was arranged to celebrate unity," she continued. "But unity built on silence is not unity at all." A ripple moved through the crowd. Edward's hand tightened around his glass. Isabella reached into a folder Marcus had discreetly placed beside the fountain earlier. She lifted a single page. "This," she said, "is a letter I received from Edward Langston." Edward's smile vanished. "It outlines financial pressure placed on individuals connected to me. Pressure designed to isolate, intimidate, and control." Gasps rippled outward. Edward stepped forward sharply. "This is inappropriate." Isabella did not look at him. "There are more," she said. "Messages, threats, quiet interventions, all under the guise of protection." She lifted another document. "And this is proof of attempts to interfere with the livelihood of someone I care deeply about." Marcus stepped into the light. The crowd turned. Recognition flickered. Edward's composure cracked. "This is a misunderstanding," Edward said loudly. "A private matter." "No," Isabella replied calmly. "It's a pattern." She looked directly at her parents for the first time that evening. "I was told to obey," she said, "to sacrifice my voice for appearance. Tonight, I choose honesty instead." Victoria's face drained of color. Charles opened his mouth, then closed it again. The guests whispered openly now. Edward's world was unraveling in real time. "You're making a mistake," he hissed under his breath. Isabella met his gaze. The only mistake would have been staying silent. For a moment, Edward considered forcing control back into the situation. But the audience had shifted. He was no longer the conductor. He was the spectacle. Edward set his glass down carefully. "You've embarrassed yourself," he said quietly. "And your family." Isabella straightened. "I've freed myself." She turned away from him and walked toward Marcus. The garden erupted into murmurs, divided loyalty, shocked stares. Edward stood frozen. Victoria trembled. Charles looked as though he had aged 10 years in 10 seconds. And Isabella Hartley, once the obedient daughter, had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The masks had fallen, and the war was no longer hidden. The garden did not erupt into chaos. That would have been easier. Instead, it dissolved into something far more dangerous, controlled outrage. Guests smiled stiffly. Conversations resumed in hushed tones. Glasses clinked again, but the sound felt hollow, artificial. Everyone understood what had just happened. And everyone understood that nothing would be said openly, not yet. Edward Langston recovered first. He always did. He adjusted his cufflinks, lifted his glass once more, and addressed the guests with a calm that bordered on chilling. "Forgive the interruption," he said smoothly. "Emotions run high in moments of change. Let us continue the evening." A few guests laughed nervously. Others avoided his gaze. The damage had already been done. Isabella felt it the moment she stepped back inside the house. The warmth vanished. The Hartley estate, once pristine and familiar, felt hostile, as though the walls themselves had turned against her. Victoria did not wait. She stood in the drawing room, posture rigid, eyes blazing with a fury Isabella had never seen so naked before. "Explain yourself," her mother said. Charles closed the door behind them. "You humiliated us," Victoria continued. "You humiliated this family in front of people who matter." Isabella met her gaze steadily. "I told the truth." "You told your truth," Victoria snapped. "And you did it without regard for consequence." Charles finally spoke, his voice low. "Edward is not a man you expose lightly." Isabella's heart pounded, but she did not retreat. "I will not marry him." Silence fell. Victoria's lips curled into a thin smile. "Then you will leave." The words landed like a verdict. "No protection," Victoria continued. "No financial support. No name. You will not carry the Hartley legacy into scandal." Isabella inhaled slowly. "Then I leave." Charles flinched just slightly. Victoria did not. Edward waited in the corridor. He dismissed the servants with a gesture, then turned to Isabella. "You've won a small battle," he said quietly. "But understand something, I lose nothing by waiting." Isabella met his gaze without fear. "You already lost." Edward smiled faintly. "You believe that because you don't yet understand the cost." He leaned closer. "Marcus will." Marcus felt it before he saw it. Police officers appeared at his studio the following morning. Polite, thorough, curious. They asked about his finances, his contacts, his movements. Everything was legal. Everything was calculated. By midday, Julian called him. "They're freezing accounts," Julian said urgently. "Not permanently, but enough to choke you." Marcus clenched his fists. "Edward!" Julian didn't need to confirm it. That night, Isabella packed a single suitcase. She left her childhood room untouched otherwise, as if refusing to give the house the satisfaction of knowing which memories she carried with her. Lydia watched from the doorway. "I never meant for it to go this far," Lydia whispered. Isabella did not stop packing. "You chose safety over loyalty," Isabella said calmly. "Now live with it." She walked past her cousin without another word. The city swallowed them quickly. Marcus and Isabella moved into Julian's small apartment in a quiet neighborhood where no one knew their names. The furniture was mismatched, the walls bare, but the air was free. For the first time since the garden party, Isabella slept deeply. Until the letter arrived. It was delivered by hand, no return address. Edward's handwriting was unmistakable. "You've mistaken exposure for victory. I hope you're prepared for what comes next." Marcus read it silently. "They won't stop," he said. Isabella nodded. "Neither will we." The Hartleys retaliated quietly. Connections dried up, friends withdrew, invitations vanished. Isabella's name became a rumor spoken carefully, at a distance. Edward's influence pressed in from all sides. And yet, something unexpected happened. A journalist reached out, then another. Whispers of Edward's behavior began circulating in circles he did not control. Power, once questioned, begins to fracture. Edward felt it, and it enraged him. One evening, as Isabella and Marcus walked home from the market, a black car slowed beside them. Edward stepped out. The street was empty. "I offered you grace," he said calmly. "You chose war." Isabella did not flinch. "You started this." Edward's gaze shifted to Marcus. "And you will end it." Marcus stepped forward. "If you're here to threaten..." "I'm here to warn," Edward interrupted. "Walk away. Tonight. or everything you've built will collapse." Isabella's voice was steady. "We choose each other." Edward studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "So be it." He returned to the car and drove away. That night, Isabella finally understood. There would be no quiet resolution, no forgiveness, no retreat. This was no longer about marriage. It was about who controlled the narrative. And Edward Langston was preparing to escalate. For a while, it felt as though the storm had passed. Not because Edward Langston had surrendered, but because his presence faded into silence. No letters, no messages, no black cars idling across the street. Silence, Isabella would later learn, was Edward's most dangerous weapon. Marcus and Isabella settled into a fragile rhythm. Mornings began quietly. Marcus left early, taking freelance commissions wherever he could find them: small galleries, private collectors, anonymous contracts that paid just enough to survive. Isabella managed correspondence, arranged deliveries, and learned how to stretch money further than she ever had before. The apartment was modest, but it was theirs. At night, they cooked together, laughed softly, and spoke about futures that no longer felt impossible, only distant. For the first time in months, Isabella breathed without fear tightening her chest. She almost believed they were safe. Julian remained cautious. "You don't disappear from someone like Edward Langston's life," he warned. "You survive him or you don't." Isabella nodded, but hope is stubborn, and hope is dangerous. The first crack appeared in the form of a stranger. A woman approached Isabella one afternoon while she waited outside a bookstore. She was older, elegant in a restrained way, with eyes that missed nothing. "You're Isabella Hartley," the woman said softly. Isabella stiffened. "Who are you?" The woman smiled faintly. "Someone who remembers your family from before." Before. The word lingered. "My name is Eleanor Cross," she continued, "and there are things about the Hartleys you were never meant to know." Before Isabella could respond, Eleanor slipped a card into her hand and walked away. That night, Isabella couldn't sleep. She met Eleanor 2 days later in a quiet cafe far from the city center. "You shouldn't trust me," Eleanor said calmly, "but you should listen." Isabella folded her hands. "I'm listening." Eleanor exhaled slowly. Edward Langston didn't become powerful by chance. He inherited alliances, old ones, alliances your family once helped create. Isabella's stomach tightened. "Your great-grandfather," Eleanor continued, "was not just a businessman. He was a fixer. He made problems disappear. People too." Isabella's breath caught. "That's impossible." Eleanor met her gaze. "That's what your parents hoped you'd believe." Marcus listened in silence as Isabella recounted the meeting. "This explains why Edward is relentless," Marcus said finally. "He isn't just losing control over you. He's protecting a system." "And I'm a liability," Isabella whispered. Marcus reached for her hand. "You're a threat." That night, Edward Langston reappeared without warning, not in person, in the news. A brief article surfaced questioning Marcus's professional credibility. Nothing concrete, just doubt, enough to poison trust. The next day, a gallery declined Marcus's work without explanation. The day after that, Julian called. "They're moving again," he said. "Quietly." Isabella's false sense of safety shattered. The next letter arrived at dawn. No handwriting, just typed words. "You were warned." Marcus crushed the paper. "We can't stay here," Isabella nodded. "We leave the city." Julian arranged transport, discreet, untraceable. Within 48 hours, they were gone. The countryside welcomed them with deceptive calm. Rolling fields, quiet roads, No crowds, no shadows. They rented a small cottage under assumed names, far from Hartley influence. For a few days, peace returned, but fear does not vanish. It waits. Isabella began having dreams. Her great-grandfather's portrait, one she barely remembered, stood over her, faceless. Blood stained the edges of the frame. She woke with the certainty that the past was not finished with her. Edward Langston stood at the window of his office, staring out over the city. "She thinks distance will save her," he said quietly. A man behind him shifted uneasily. "What are your instructions?" Edward's smile was thin. "Prepare the final measure." The countryside was supposed to erase the past. Instead, it sharpened it. In the quiet of the rented cottage, Isabella found herself thinking more than she ever had before. There were no distractions here, no crowded streets, no forced smiles, no carefully monitored conversations. Only silence. And silence has a way of unearthing buried truths. The first sign came from a locked drawer. The cottage owner had assured them everything inside belonged to previous tenants. But one evening, while searching for extra linens, Isabella found a narrow wooden drawer wedged beneath the bed frame. Inside lay a leather-bound notebook. Old, worn, personal. Marcus watched as Isabella opened it carefully, her fingers trembling. The name on the inside cover made her heart stop. Charles Hartley, her father. The entries were not recent. They dated back decades, years, before Isabella had been born. At first, the writing was mundane. Notes about meetings, names of associates, financial calculations. Then the tone shifted. Names appeared again and again, always followed by brief, unsettling phrases, handled discreetly, removed from circulation, resolved permanently. Isabella felt cold. "This isn't just influence," Marcus said quietly. "This is control." Isabella closed the book slowly. "This is why Edward won't let go." The next day, Eleanor Cross arrived unannounced. She stood at the edge of the gravel path leading to the cottage, as if unsure whether she was welcome. "I didn't expect you to trust me," Eleanor said. "But I knew you'd find the truth eventually." Isabella held up the notebook. Eleanor nodded grimly. "Your father was groomed into the system. But it began with your great-grandfather. He was one of the original architects." Marcus frowned. "Architects of what?" Eleanor met his gaze. "A private network. Power beyond politics. Influence beyond law." Isabella's chest tightened. "And Edward?" "Edward is an heir," Eleanor replied. "So are you." The words echoed. Heir. Isabella shook her head. "I never agreed to any of this." Eleanor's voice softened. "No one ever does." Edward Langston's fixation was no longer a mystery. He wasn't fighting for Isabella's obedience. He was fighting for containment. Because if Isabella truly walked away, if she spoke freely, the entire structure could fracture. Eleanor stayed the night. Over tea and dim lamplight, she told them everything. About disappearances disguised as relocations, about fortunes built on silence, about alliances that spanned generations. "You were raised as the moral counterbalance," Eleanor said. "Your parents believed shielding you from the truth would protect the system." "And now?" Marcus asked. "And now," Eleanor said quietly, "you're the liability." That night, Isabella wept, not from fear, but from grief. Her childhood, her family name, her understanding of herself, all illusions. Marcus held her as the weight of it pressed down. "We can still choose," he said. "They don't get to decide who you are." Isabella wiped her tears. "Then we don't just run." Marcus looked at her. "What are you saying?" She lifted her chin. "We end this." Edward Langston made his move 2 days later. not with threats, with inevitability. An unmarked car appeared on the road near the cottage. It never stopped, never followed. It simply passed, once an hour, every hour. "They know where we are," Marcus said. Isabella nodded. "They want us to panic." Instead, she planned. Eleanor contacted an international journalist, one with a reputation for publishing stories no one else dared to touch. Evidence was needed. Proof. The notebook. Letters. Financial records. They began compiling everything. Every name, every connection, every crime hidden behind respectability. But exposure came with a price. Edward would not lose quietly. The final warning arrived at midnight, a single message on Isabella's phone. Blood does not outrun blood. She stared at the screen until it went dark. Marcus took her hand. "We leave tonight." "No," Isabella said. Marcus looked at her sharply. She met his gaze, steady and resolved. "We don't leave to hide. We leave to survive the fallout." By dawn, the cottage was empty, and Edward Langston stood in his office, staring at the same city he had once ruled without resistance. "They've chosen disclosure," he said calmly. The man across from him hesitated. "Then everything changes." Edward smiled faintly. "Yes," he said, "it does." The truth was no longer a secret. It was a weapon. Isabella understood this as the plane lifted off the runway, carrying her, Marcus, and Eleanor away from the country that had shaped and betrayed her. Beneath them, cities shrank into patterns of light. Borders dissolved into lines on a map. But power did not dissolve so easily. Edward Langston's influence followed silently, stretching across jurisdictions, laundering itself through institutions that never slept. "You still have time," Eleanor said quietly, as they sat in the dim cabin, voices low. "Once this goes public, there's no undoing it." Isabella didn't look away from the window. There was never an undoing, only postponement. They landed under assumed names, a different country, a different language, a different rhythm. And yet the pressure arrived within days. A bank froze an account. A landlord withdrew an agreement. A source stopped responding. Edward wasn't chasing them. He was tightening the net. The journalist's name was Daniel Hargreaves. He had broken scandals that toppled ministers and corporations alike. When Eleanor arranged the meeting, he listened without interruption, his eyes sharp, his pen still. When Isabella finished, the room remained silent. "This story," Daniel said finally, "will dismantle legacies." "Good," Isabella replied. Daniel studied her. "It will also make you a target." Isabella nodded. "I already am." They began verification. Every document had to be confirmed, every claim cross-checked, every witness protected. Time slowed into tension. Edward moved faster. Marcus noticed it first. A man standing across the street too often. A phone call that cut off mid-ring. A package delivered to the wrong address. Opened. "We're exposed," he said. Isabella felt the weight settle into her bones. Not fear, responsibility. Edward Langston watched the news feeds closely. "Containment has failed," one of his advisors said. Edward nodded once. "Then escalation becomes necessary." But the fallout, Edward raised a hand. "I will not be remembered as the man who lost control." He turned back to the window. "Remove the distraction." The distraction arrived as an offer. A private intermediary contacted Isabella. Immunity, protection, silence, all in exchange for walking away. Marcus wanted to destroy the message. Eleanor wanted to analyze it. Isabella read it calmly, then deleted it. "No deals," she said. "No bargaining." Marcus searched her face. "They'll retaliate." "They already are," Isabella replied. The retaliation came that night. Marcus didn't return home. At first, Isabella told herself he was delayed. Then an hour passed, then 2. By dawn, panic set in. Eleanor's phone rang. She listened, went pale. "They have him," Eleanor said. Isabella felt the world tilt. Edward Langston stood in a quiet room, hands folded. Marcus sat across from him, restrained but unharmed. "You're brave," Edward said conversationally. "I respect that." Marcus said nothing. "You love her," Edward continued. "That makes you predictable." Edward leaned forward. "She wants to burn the world. You're standing in the fire." Marcus met his gaze. "She's standing in the truth." Edward smiled faintly. Truth is irrelevant without power. Isabella received the message at noon. A location, a time, a condition, come alone, or Marcus disappears. Eleanor grabbed her arm. "This is what he wants." Isabella's voice was steady. "This is where it ends." She went. The building was empty. Edward waited. "You could still walk away," he said. Isabella stepped forward. "Release him." Edward sighed. "You don't understand. This system, your bloodline, it requires silence." Isabella's eyes burned. "It ends today." Edward studied her, then nodded. "You're stronger than I thought," he said. A pause. "And that's why you'll lose." Outside, sirens began to wail. Not police, journalists. Daniel Hargreaves had published everything. Names, proof, connections. The world cracked open. Edward's phone vibrated. Once, twice. He glanced at it. And for the first time, he looked uncertain. The world did not end all at once. It fractured. Screens across continents lit up with headlines that carried real weight. Not gossip, not speculation, names, documents, transactions. Patterns that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Edward Langston's empire did not collapse dramatically. It imploded quietly. Banks froze assets. Boards suspended executives. Allies vanished overnight, severing ties as if they had never existed. The system that had thrived on silence now faced exposure it could not outrun. Inside the abandoned building, Edward felt it happen in real time. His phone vibrated again and again. He did not answer. Across from him, Isabella stood perfectly still. "You've done it," Edward said softly. "You've turned a controlled burn into an inferno." Isabella met his gaze. "You did that yourself." Edward smiled faintly, but it did not reach his eyes. "You think this ends me?" "I think it ends your control," she replied. Edward leaned back, studying her with something close to admiration. "You were never meant to be the one who broke it." Isabella's voice was steady. "I chose to be." The doors burst open moments later, not with armed force, with cameras, voices, questions shouted from every direction. Edward Langston turned toward the noise and exhaled slowly. "Well," he said, "this is inconvenient." Marcus was released without ceremony. No apology, no explanation, just a door opening and silence. He stumbled into daylight, disoriented, until he saw her. Isabella, running. She collided into him, holding him as though the world might try to steal him back. "I thought I lost you," she whispered. Marcus held her tightly. "You didn't." Around them, the noise grew louder. The truth had escaped containment. Edward Langston was not arrested that day. Power rarely falls so cleanly, but he was summoned, investigated, publicly questioned, and that was enough, because power, once stripped of mystique, does not recover easily. The Hartley estate went quiet. Victoria Hartley locked herself away from the world she had once navigated flawlessly. Charles Hartley resigned from boards and councils, his legacy reduced to footnotes in unfolding investigations. Isabella did not return. Not for closure. Not for apology. Some doors, once closed, remain closed for survival. Months passed. The world moved forward, slowly, carefully. Edward Langston faded from relevance, not erased, but diminished. A man once untouchable, now avoided, and Isabella learned something unexpected. Freedom is not loud. It is not triumphant. It is quiet and heavy. She and Marcus settled somewhere new, a place where no one knew their names, where mornings began without fear. Marcus painted again, not for survival, but for expression. His work changed. Less storm, more horizon, Isabella wrote. Not about revenge, about choice, about the cost of silence, about what it means to walk away from power and live anyway. One evening, as they sat watching the sun sink into the sea, Marcus spoke softly. "Do you regret it?" Isabella considered the question carefully. She thought of her childhood, her parents, the life she had been promised, and the one she had chosen instead. "No," she said. "But I understand now." "Understand what?" "That freedom isn't free," she replied. "It just asks a different kind of price." Marcus took her hand. They watched the horizon darken together. Years later, Isabella received a letter. No return address, just a single sentence. Some systems never fully disappear, but some never recover either. She folded the letter and placed it into a drawer she rarely opened. Some reminders did not need answers. The world remembered the scandal. But it remembered Isabella differently, not as a victim, not as a rebel, but as the woman who refused to inherit silence. And somewhere far from the estates, the names, the expectations Isabella Hartley lived. Not obedient, not owned, but free.
If you enjoy intense emotional storytelling, forbidden romance, and dramatic stories, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more stories like this. Would you choose love or family? Kindly drop in the comment section.